The account was created in 2012. One world. One player. No server. Just a single survival file that a kid named Elliot built over the course of about 8 months before stopping completely in early 2013. The folder sat on a hard drive that moved from computer to computer across a decade. Old laptop to external drive to a drawer in his childhood bedroom that he stopped opening. The way things get preserved without anyone deciding to preserve them. Not saved on purpose. Just not deleted. Elliot logged back in 10 years later. He said the first thing he noticed was that the world was exactly the way he left it. The second thing he noticed was the footprints. He posted about it in fragments. That's the first thing you need to understand about how this story comes to you. Not a single documented thread. Not a clean video series. Fragments, a post here, a reply there, a screenshot dropped into a Discord server with no context, a follow-up 3 days later when people started asking questions. The kind of breadcrumb trail someone leaves when they're not trying to tell a story. When they're just processing something out loud and the internet happens to be listening. I spent 11 days collecting those fragments before I felt like I had enough to understand what I was looking at. What I found was this. Elliot opened the world on a Tuesday night in February 2023. He said he hadn't planned to. He'd been transferring files from an old external drive and found the Minecraft folder by accident. He hadn't thought about the world in years. He wasn't even sure he still had a Java installation that would run it. He did. He opened it. The world loaded exactly as he remembered. His first base, a dirt house he'd built in the first few days before he figured out wood was better, was still standing to the northeast. The cobblestone tower he'd built in the second month, too tall and too narrow, listing slightly to one side because he'd placed the foundation wrong. The underground farm he'd spent most of month 4 constructing, carefully lit, carefully irrigated, completely unnecessary because he'd never had food problems in that world to begin with. Just something to build. He said walking through it felt like reading a journal he didn't remember writing. He spent about an hour just looking around. Then he went to the original spawn point, the beach where he'd first appeared in 2012, to see if he could find his old starting chest. That's when he saw the footprints. Footprints don't exist in vanilla Minecraft. That's the first thing that needs to be established clearly. There is no mechanic in standard Minecraft that leaves physical footprints in terrain. The ground does not record movement. Sand doesn't depress. Snow doesn't compress into the shape of a boot. It simply isn't something the game does. And yet, the beach at spawn had a trail of depressions in the sand leading from the waterline up toward the treeline. Evenly spaced. 2 parallel lines. Something had walked from the water to the trees and the sand had recorded it. Elliot took a screenshot. He posted it without explanation into the Discord server he was in. Just the image. No caption. Someone replied, "What am I looking at?" He replied, "My Minecraft world from 2012. Those weren't there when I left." He checked for mods first. He was thorough about this and I want to give him credit for that because a lot of people would have skipped that step. He verified the installation, checked the mod folder, confirmed it was vanilla. He checked the world seed against online seed explorers to see if beach generation in that version could produce terrain that looked like footprints. Could not. He checked for multiple instances, whether a second client had somehow been running. His logs said no. He checked whether his file timestamps showed any modification since 2013. The world file itself hadn't been touched. But the footprints were there. He followed them. The trail led from the beach, through the gap in the treeline where he'd originally cut his first path, across the flat plain beyond, and stopped at the edge of his underground farm entrance. The wooden trapdoor he'd built over the entrance was open. He had closed it when he left in 2013. He remembered it specifically because he'd been careful about mobs getting in and ruining the lighting. He'd closed it and placed a block over it to be certain. The block was still there, but the trapdoor beneath it was open. He went down. The farm was intact. 12 rows of wheat, fully grown, all of it ready to harvest. 12 rows of carrots beside those. Every water channel clear. Every torch still burning. The chest at the far end of the farm that he'd stocked with seeds was still closed. He opened it. The seeds were still there. But there was something else in the chest now. Pushed into the corner of the inventory, taking up one slot, was a single item he didn't recognize. It was a map. Not a blank map. A filled map. Rendered. Showing terrain. His terrain, he could see the shape of his base on it, the cobblestone tower, the beach at spawn. But the map extended further than he'd explored. The edges showed biomes he'd never visited. Terrain that technically existed in his world file, but that he had never uncovered because he'd never traveled that far. And in the center of the unexplored section, in a biome he'd never been to, there was a marker. Red. Precise. The kind of marker you place deliberately. Someone had explored his world. Someone had traveled into terrain he'd never seen. And they'd left him a map with a marker pointing at something. He didn't go immediately. I want to make that clear because it matters to understanding who Elliot is. He's not impulsive. He's careful. He sat with the map for 2 sessions before he decided to follow it. He told the Discord server what he'd found and asked if anyone had an explanation. The thread went 30 replies deep over 2 days. Nobody had a solid one. He did his own research. Checked whether maps could be pre-generated in world files without player exploration. They could not. A map in Minecraft renders based on movement. The terrain reveals itself as a player physically travels through it. The filled sections of Elliot's map represented real distance covered by someone actually walking through his world. And the marker. A banner marker on a map requires a specific crafting interaction that cannot happen passively. Someone had stood at that location and marked it. Deliberately. For him to find. He decided to go. The journey took 2 full play sessions. He was in survival mode, no cheats, the way the world had always been. Which meant the travel was slow and real and occasionally dangerous. He died twice to mobs in the first session and had to respawn at his bed and re-equip. He lost about 20 minutes of progress each time but kept going. The terrain in the unexplored section of his world was different from the areas he'd built in. His home region was flat and open. This was different. Hilly. Dense spruce forest. Ravines cutting through the landscape at irregular intervals. Naturally dramatic in the way that certain Minecraft seeds generate terrain that looks almost designed. As he got closer to the marker, the forest thickened. Then it thinned. Then it opened entirely into a clearing he could not explain. The clearing was not natural generation. He knew it immediately because he knew his world. 10 years ago version of himself had walked a lot of this world, and natural generation doesn't produce flat circular clearings in the middle of dense spruce forest. The trees stopped at a perfect ring. Inside the ring, the ground was covered in a pattern. Not random. Not terrain noise. A pattern laid out in 2 types of grass block arranged deliberately into something that from ground level looked like texture but from above. He went above, he placed dirt blocks to climb and look was a symbol. He didn't know what symbol. He took a screenshot and posted it. Someone in the thread identified it within an hour. An Old Norse binding rune. Specifically one historically associated with memory and return. Memory and return. Elliot had been gone for 10 years and something in his world had laid down a symbol about memory and return and put a marker on a map in his chest. At the center of the clearing was a lectern. Just one. No surrounding structure. No chest. No additional signs. Just a lectern placed at the exact center of the symbol, with a book open on it, sitting in a 10-year-old survival world that had never had a mod installed. He approached it slowly. He said in a later post that he was moving his character carefully, like he was worried about disturbing something. He read the book. He transcribed it in full in the Discord thread. You stayed away longer than expected. I want you to know the farm has been managed. The wheat cycles every few days on its own here, as you probably know. I don't want you to think I was here to fix things. I wasn't. I was here because this is where I end up. It has been a quiet 10 years. The trees in the north section grew considerably. Your tower is still standing, which surprised me given the foundation. I want to ask you something and I hope it doesn't frighten you. Do you remember why you stopped? Not why you left the world. Why you stopped. There's a difference. You didn't leave because you got bored. I watched you those last few weeks in 2013 and you weren't bored. You were somewhere else already. Something was pulling you out. I want to know what it was. Not for any reason that should concern you. I simply want to understand the thing that was stronger than this place. Because this place was not nothing. You built something real here, something that held. I've been here the whole time and I can confirm that. It held. Write your answer somewhere I can find it. I'll check the chest. I'm glad you came back. He sat with that for a long time. He said in a post the following day that he hadn't slept well. Not because he was scared. He was clear about that. He said it wasn't fear. It was something harder to name. The feeling of being known by something that shouldn't know you. The feeling of being watched carefully and without malice for 10 years by something that noticed when your wheat was ready and knew your tower had a bad foundation and had opinions about why you left. He went back into the world that night. He crafted a book. He sat in the underground farm in the place he'd spent most of his time as a 12-year-old, and he wrote an answer in the book. He didn't share what he wrote. He said it was private. The Discord thread respected that, and I will too. He placed the book in the chest. He logged off. 3 days later he logged back in. The book was gone from the chest. In its place was a single block he'd never seen before in any version of Minecraft. Smooth, dark, faintly luminescent. No ID he could identify. It didn't match any block in the game's registry. It sat in the chest like it belonged there, and it gave off just enough light to illuminate the inside of the chest when he opened it. He didn't take it out. He closed the chest. He sat in the farm for a while. Then he climbed back up to the surface and stood on the beach where the footprints had been. The depressions in the sand were still there. He stood in them, 1 foot in each, looking out at the water. He posted one line after that session. I think it just wanted to know it wasn't the only thing that remembered. I don't have a clean explanation for what was in Elliot's world. I've covered worlds that changed around players, worlds that read memories, worlds that built themselves. I've covered entities that followed and entities that imprisoned and entities that grieved. This one doesn't fit cleanly into any of those categories. Whatever was in Elliot's survival file wasn't threatening him. It wasn't leading him somewhere dangerous. It wasn't pressing on wounds or forcing confrontation. It was tending his farm. It was exploring his world carefully and marking things worth seeing. It was waiting patiently for a decade, and when he came back it asked him one genuine question and accepted whatever answer he gave. It was curious about him. And that, somehow, is the strangest thing I've encountered in all of this. Not a monster. Not a ghost. Not a god. Just something that settled into a 10-year-old survival world and found it interesting enough to stay. Found the cobblestone tower with the bad foundation worth watching. Found the underground farm worth maintaining. Found the question of why a 12-year-old kid stopped logging in worth sitting with for 10 years until he came back and could answer it himself. The world is still on Elliot's drive. He still logs in occasionally. He said the block in the chest is still there and still glowing. He said he sometimes finds small things rearranged. A torch moved. A flower placed somewhere it wasn't before. Nothing demanding. Nothing frightening. Just evidence that the place is still occupied. Just evidence that something is still paying attention. He said he's glad he didn't